Okay, can everybody hear me on the live session as well? Zoom? Sunil? Right. You can hear me online?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Hello, everybody online. Okay, so Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome back. We're starting our third and our last panel for the conference today. We have our senior faculty member, Dr. Shumaila Attar, presenting first. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology. She's done her PhD in sociology from the Institute of South Asian Studies, University of Punjab. She's an experienced qualitative researcher. She's also an experienced consultant. She's got a special interest in marginalized communities with a special focus on religious minorities. Her PhD research was on the Christian community. And now she started working on the Sikh community, and she's very generously, even though she's in the process of publishing her work, but she's first presenting to us in our conference, especially for our students and all our guests. Thank you so much, Dr. Shumaila.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sara, for this introduction and this opportunity to present. So my research title is Discrimination Against Religious Minorities, and with a special focus towards the Sikh community in Punjab. So a little bit of background and problem statement. Though the religious minorities are very small in number, still we keep hearing and listening about them in the news, either be it a religious festival. We hardly come across the news where they have been subjected to discrimination. So this general portrayal of the religious minorities is very peaceful when it comes to the atmosphere. However, the day-to-day experience depicts a very different picture, a picture of exclusion, violence, and discrimination. These issues range from very basic to very complex, such as lack of basic facilities, whether it be education, health, sanitation, etc., to the other end, which is hate speech, forced conversions, targeted killings, and accusations of blasphemy. Religious extremists in Pakistan make use of the words that are harsh and also make use of negative labels for the religious minorities. The idea behind this objective is to reflect the hatred towards these religious communities, both at the workplace and in the community. This discrimination towards these religious minorities is not a new phenomenon, and this can be classified as old as the documented history itself. Coming to a few of the studies that have been conducted in this regard, since inception of Pakistan on 14th August 1947, whose basis was the ideology of Islam, majority of the population was Muslim, with almost 23% of the population that constitutes of non-Muslims. Today, this percentage has declined almost to only 3.7% approximately. The reason being that the religious minority faces numerous challenges such as employment discrimination, forcible conversion, societal discrimination, violence, and many more. Another study states that how these religious minorities are forced to convert under intense pressure. The majority generally belittle the faith and religious beliefs of the non-Muslims. And we have heard this from Dr. Ira also in the morning sessions. And one of the challenges that these minorities experience in the absence or decreased availability of places of worship. A parliamentary human rights group identified how these communities are under constant threat and lacks the freedom when it comes to practice of their own religion. Pakistan tends to remain a volatile area where these minorities have to face maltreatment and insecurity. The freedom to practice their religion and to express it seems to come under threat in the country. The research questions for this specific study are: the purpose is to understand structural factors behind forced religious conversion. The study tends to explore the experiences of the Sikh community towards the phenomena of hate speech, and to explore how this community is getting affected by the phenomena of forced marriages. The research was qualitative in nature, hence the focus group discussions was planned in each of the city. The cities selected were Nankana Sahib and Sialkot, and 2 focus groups were conducted in each of the cities. And one group was conducted with the male members and the other one was conducted with the female members. So the idea was to have an in-depth understanding of the phenomena of conversion, both forced and voluntary, forced marriages and hate speech towards the Sikh community. So as previously stated, the data was collected from the city of Nankana Sahib and Sialkot, and 2 focus group discussions in each city were conducted. For each city, one group comprised of female and the other of the male members from the Sikh community. The members were recruiting using convenient sampling through the Gurdwara head of the city. Each group comprised of 8 to 9 members. So the findings of the study are as follows, that if we look at the general opinion regarding forced versus voluntary conversion, no ambiguity exists among the community when it comes to the concept of forced versus voluntary conversion. The differentiation is quite obvious. However, as they have never experienced such incidents in their areas, so they couldn't highlight them. A belief exists among the community that if any such incident would occur and they would report it to the law enforcement agencies, a firm action would be taken. There seems to be a lack of awareness regarding any laws related to forced conversions and marriages. Despite of the above highlighted opinions of this community, there exists a general satisfaction along with a desire to have improvement in the laws. So they believe that laws are there, but the implementation part is missing somehow within the system. And there was this very interesting suggestion that came up for those who convert voluntarily. The respondents believe that a support from the government is required, and it was suggested that the converts should be placed in a place such as Darul Aman for, let's say, 2 to 3 months, where they should have this option to reconsider their opinion of whether to convert or not. During this time period, they should have the freedom to practice their religion without any pressure to get married into the newly converted religion. It is believed that there are laws regarding this, but again, implementation part is currently missing regarding these laws. There was also this mention regarding how if some Muslim approach them wishing to convert to Sikhism and how they are stopped, as the phenomena of being a murtad is well understood. So there are instances where the Muslim community feels like converted to Sikhism, but as we all know, according to the Sharia laws, that we cannot convert to any other religion from Islam, but anyone who wish to convert to Islam has this option with them. And the reason why they are being discouraged is because they'll be then labeled as murtad, means that the one and the term that is used is कि वो वाजिबुल कत्ल हो जाएगा. So that is why they are discouraged. Regarding the post conversions, not much concern regarding the phenomena exists among this community. There's only one incident that the community is aware of that took around 4 years back. However, this one incident does not hold a negative attitude towards the others, that is the majority. All seems to believe that this phenomena is apt for the Hindus residing in the province of Sindh, as we are also aware that the news that we always hear regarding these post conversions are about the Hindu community largely residing in the province of Sindh. The people belonging to lower socioeconomic class and those which are illiterate are believed to be the vulnerable ones who would be easily targeted for conversion. Talking about the forced marriages, as mentioned earlier, the only incident that the community is aware of that happened in Punjab was where this girl was forced to convert to Islam and later got married. Again, the opinion that Hindu community is targeted mostly for this purpose, and the Sikh community do not face such an issue in Punjab. Interestingly, the phenomenon of Hindu-Sikh marriage is common within Punjab, where the children later adopt the religion of father. This is considered to be a part of the concept of interfaith harmony. There have been few cases in the province of KPK, which were known to them, where 2 of the girls were forced to marriage and were later recovered. The women in the city of Sialkot had a relatively higher rate of education, hence had a belief that because they are liberal and well educated, so they cannot be targeted. Male members, however, felt a bit uncomfortable talking about this. They were all referring to the one case they knew of that happened in Punjab and had a firm belief that the girl was innocent and was being trapped. Hate speech, unlike the previous phenomena of conversion and forced marriages, this is something that the community experiences frequently. A few incidents that were reported included where a student has to leave his college because he was subjected to hate speech. The other quoted how he was excluded from the class and was forced to bring their own chair simply because they belonged to a minority group. One had an experience where he was stopped to offer prayers in the Gurdwara, and many more incidents similar to these ones. Generally, they live in complete harmony with the majority, and the majority shows the respectable behavior towards them. The incidents of hate speech are more common on social media platforms where people can easily disguise themselves and be vocal about their opinions as people feel more powerful behind the screens than in person. Unlike the phenomena of conversion and forced marriages where Hindus are considered to be the primary targets, here this phenomena is more applicable to the Christian community according to them. And they are the ones who are often the victims of hate speech in Punjab. It was mentioned how things have started to change with the improvement in educational levels, and this is now just restricted to illiterate populations. The primary reason for the occurrence of hate speech was mentioned to be the intolerance among the majority. Looking at the role of the government, not much could be said about the role, as the male members were aware how their leaders are the ones who are selected and not their elected representatives. An immense appreciation for the PTI government was there due to the Kartarpur corridor opening. A belief exists among the community that if any such incident would occur and they would report it to the law enforcement agencies, a firm action would be taken. Despite of the above highlighted opinions of the community, there exists a general satisfaction along with the desire to have improvement in laws. It is believed that there are laws regarding this, but implementation part is currently missing regarding these laws. So concluding this, for a small community like them, the issues of conversion and forced marriages are not very significant. The phenomena of hate speech do exist, but they try to avoid and get into any sort of trouble. Overall, the community tends to be living peacefully in Punjab. A favorable response exists towards the minority from the government. As all mentioned, how Kartarpur corridor is a nice initiative of the government for the minorities. Some recommendations are regarding the implementation of laws regarding minority rights, and the role of media need to be more focused, not just on covering the religious rituals and festivals, but their presence is also required when incidents like these occur. This is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions online? Online participants, any questions? Could you raise your hands, please, so we can unmute you? Do we have any questions from the people here? And
thank you for a very interesting talk, Dr. Shamaila. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced in the field when you were trying to access Sikh communities or the narrative about discrimination?
Okay, so I did not actually face any challenges as such, because we first contacted the head of the Gurdwara, and he was the one who was responsible for bringing in the respondents. So that's how it worked.
thank you so much, Dr. Shamaila. I also had a question. When you were researching the Sikh community, did they share any other challenges and problems? Because that would help our students, and maybe, I mean, some thoughts about what else we can branch into with regards to researching them. Anything related to educational exclusion or, social mobility, anything like that.
I think one interesting thing that I would like to share is that because one of the reasons that why they portrayed a very positive picture could be because I had a reference over there for from where they were being the part of the group, and they were reluctant to talk about a lot of things in presence of the head of the Gurdwara, and that was regarding the hate speech that they experience occasionally. So, for example, the teacher not letting you sit in the classes. Another interesting thing was that how they are forced to study Islamiyat in the colleges, and ethics is being offered as a substitute, but the teachers don't let them study that, and they are forced to study that. So I think this the government should implement certain policies where they should be where they should have this freedom to exercise their religion as per their convenience. And also they have another concern that the way the blasphemy is applied on them, so they believe that there are a lot of incidents where the majority also make fun of their religion. So there should be some accountability for them also, where they can go and file or lodge a complaint against those majority also.
That's really interesting because I read this somewhere that we have the legal clause that we need to teach our religious minorities ethics instead of Islamiyat, but because of lack of teacher training, and we don't have any teachers for ethics, we don't even have like a very good syllabus for comparative religions because we have different religious groups. So ethics generally again it's not very clear what the syllabus is, and so we don't have the teachers, we don't have the syllabus, and so the students, religious minorities, are being forced so that they don't not in the playground and not doing anything to just attend the Islamiyat classes, and then they have their grade achievement is also affected by that. So that's really interesting, and maybe one of our students can pick up on researching that further. If there are no more questions, I'll continue to introduce our next speaker. Is Ms. Taniyat Fatima, again from the FCCU family. Ms. Taniyat has recently joined us. She's completed her MPhil in Sociology from the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies, University of Punjab. She has been also working at UMT, University of Management and Technology, as a research associate. She's published 5 research articles in HEC-approved journals. Her area of research, which is very, again, something that we all want to work, we're interested in more scholars, younger scholars working in this area, is in urban planning and sustainable development. Much needed because we know that the urban migration in Pakistan is even greater than the population growth rate. Today, she'll be talking about experiences of marginalized people living in urban, overcrowded settlements, specifically those living in vertical or high-rise buildings and their issues related to privacy. Thank you, thank you, Ms. Taniyat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dr. Sara. And first of all, I would like to apologize for my throat that is not supporting me today. And I hope you all can bear with me. So as Dr. Sara discussed that in urban areas of Lahore and other cities of Pakistan, there's a huge influx apart from the population growth. So this is giving rise to many challenges, and we have to make hard decisions on how we are going to accommodate the growing population and how we are going to tackle the issues of housing and how social sustainability is going to come in handy. So when we talk about sustainability, there are more ideas about environmental sustainability, and there is less emphasis on how social sustainability can come about. So when a society basically involves and includes all the stakeholders, they basically make sure that the housing project has the liability of lasting longer. So for my presentation, my initial research work was quantitative in nature that I did in undergrad, and that highlighted many challenges of the voices that were unheard, not just in terms of policy, but also in terms of research. So adolescents or an age criteria is something that is usually kept in mind when we are researching, especially in quantitative methods. So we have to keep an idea of 18 and above respondents, because dealing with adolescents obviously and underage children has its own complications in terms of ethics. But their voices are being ignored, not just in research, but also in policy. That is why I have focused majorly on the issues of privacy, of vertical growth in Lahore. And the background of the problem is basically, so there have been housing projects in the past. We know the Ashiana housing scheme and the current Naya Pakistan housing scheme that are focusing a lot on apartment growth. And in the past, there have been known failures in the projects due to lack of the stakeholder participation. So especially the young people, the population that I'm working with, is known to have little or no decision making power when it comes to the choice of residence. So whenever apartments are considered or residential buildings are considered around the world also, when we focus on the children, we are usually focusing on the outdoor spaces and how they can navigate that and how they can focus on their physical activity in vertical growth. But whenever it comes to talking about the adults, we talk about factors like privacy and ventilation and other things that are considered more mature. So, what I argue is that privacy is as much a need of an adolescent as it is of an adult. And especially in the changing transition phase, the adolescents need more privacy because they're developing their self, they're developing their ideas about themselves, and that requires an amount of isolation. So, for that, I think it is very important to understand what this population goes through. So a little bit of background, there is well established fact in this area that due to some characteristics of the apartments that are shared space and proximity, they are known to have privacy issues in apartment buildings. And when you come to the literature in terms of Pakistan, you can hardly count the articles on fingers, how less is the literature in this area. So why adolescents need privacy? It is firstly because they are developing their sense of self and they want to develop autonomy and for emotional release, because when they do not get enough isolation for their emotional release, they might show it off in other places that might not be very suitable for that emotional release. Then they need to evaluate their actions to perform better in social situations. And then again, they need to protect the communication. So it is very important, as Irving Goffman mentions, that there is a front and there's a back of the stage where he has referred to them in different places in the house. So he says that the self talk is a very important element of development of the self, and that is done in the backstage. That is done in the areas that are excluded from public scrutiny. So that too basically adds up to the significance of the topic. And around the world, now that there has been public planning of urban places, there is a concern for incorporating youth and different mechanisms how we can incorporate them. So my research questions for the present study were how adolescents understand privacy. So what are the different meanings they attach to it? Because we live in a collectivist society, and privacy is a concept that thrives better in an individualistic society. So you can hear about all of this in Western societies, how they're allowed to have their own rooms. But in a collectivist society, privacy is something that is not considered very positive, because it is linked to secrecy, it is linked to other things that are negative in nature. So first off was the understanding of the word, and then how do they feel the need for privacy, especially living in vertical growth, and do they have enough conscious to develop the association between any certain residential structure and their need for privacy. So excuse me. So, because we are dealing with an invisible population, the most suitable method was the qualitative method, and to approach the participants in an in-depth interview. And we've kept all the ethical considerations in mind, and there has been a reflexivity notion to this, because I know as an adult, I have a very different approach towards things, and adolescents, they do not feel as comfortable. I tried to minimize that by sharing my personal experiences, as I've lived both in horizontal and apartment living and made them comfortable. So again, the data collection was done from two apartment buildings in Lahore, and in-depth interviews were conducted with adolescents, and different themes were highlighted in terms of the meanings of privacy. So first off, privacy is not being used for anything negative, as is considered by parents mostly. So the first thing that comes to mind that is supported by literature is the theme of autonomy. So privacy is being used to practice autonomy. For example, one of my respondents said that privacy is like you need that moment and time alone in a day where you just either like stay or rest or dance or whatever. So you're basically free from public judgment, and you're exercising the next thing that is highlighted is control. So you know what you want to do, and there is no other interference in your actions. And then is the access of information, what you allow people to know and who can enter that inner circle of your life. And then lastly was a very interesting theme, that was understanding that even though privacy is something that is individual in nature, but it has implications for an overall social good. So adolescents do consider that if they have their privacy and they're able to release their emotions, they're able to evaluate their actions, they actually perform better in social situations. So that was a realization that there was an understanding that privacy is not just an individual good, it has the functions of a social good as well. That is why it is the responsibility of the communities to protect privacy, not just as an individual good, but also as a social good. So the need for privacy was highlighted in different ways. For example, the need was highlighted in the need for a separate room. As we know, majority of the housing schemes, especially an apartment, is viewed as a middle income housing project. So they do not have, we have very few luxury apartments now in Lahore. Karachi has been living with this setup for a very long time, so they have a different dynamic. But in Lahore, the majority of the apartments are seen as a middle income group, so it has that kind of economic notion attached to it. And in that, there is, when there's a two-bedroom apartment, there's definitely one reserved for the children, and they have to share. And that shared space basically was something that was infringing upon the concept of privacy. So one of my respondents, as they shared, that I like to write, I have a personal journal. So I prefer doing that in isolation because I make weird faces when I'm doing it. I speak to myself. So when I want to do any such thing, I prefer that no one is watching me, because if they do, they would be judgmental. So there's a fear of the other, and there's a fear of judgment that is relieved when you have your own privacy. And that can come in handy when you have your own room and that you don't have to share it with your siblings. Second thing is the need for solitude. So there have been times that the respondents have mentioned that they need time alone, and especially in our society, when young children ask for time alone, it is considered to be something very negative by the parents and by the overall society. What is it that you're hiding? What are your problems? You can share with us and stuff. So it has a very negative connotations. Even my one of my respondents shared that when they spend too much time even in the washroom, they consider the bathroom to be a very private space. Even when they spend too much time in washroom, that is also, critically analyzed and stuff. So they say that even in our houses, there's no space that is free from scrutiny. Next thing is, we have to understand that there are certain physical characteristics of apartment that lead to this lack of privacy, and one of them is shared space. So a majority of the buildings are designed in a way that there are more than one apartments on the same floor. So you open your door and someone else's door is just right in front of you, and you can peep into their drawing rooms, you can directly peep into their bedrooms at times, and there is no sense of ownership. So a few of my respondents, for example, highlighted कि ना छत हमारी है और ना जमीन हमारी है, क्योंकि हमारी जमीन किसी की छत है और हमारी जो छत है वो किसी की जमीन है. So that shared feeling basically gives you a feeling of crowdedness, and that leads to the fact that you cannot control the environment. Then again, the next theme is that of autonomy, and how it is linked to that crowdedness is that you're constantly barging into people in shared spaces, in elevators, in stairs, in parking spaces, and there's a lot of unnecessary interaction. So, and then comes the two important factors of privacy, that are oral and visual privacy. So apartments are usually very close to each other, and you can easily hear what is going on, on the upper floor or someone beside you. And the adolescents, they feel that this is something that is really there's a big hurdle. So if they have to do something private, they might have to leave their homes. Nobody considers leaving their homes for doing something private, but they have to do this. And visual privacy again is that you're accessible more easily in terms of proximity. So it is very important to understand that we cannot turn the wheel and we cannot go back to the times when there was no urban growth and there was no urban sprawl. And it is very important to understand that we have this situation and we have to face it head on. And one of the sustainable solutions for cities around the world is vertical growth, because we are limited on land and we cannot go horizontal forever. So in that vertical growth, we have to consider the social sustainability element, and we have to involve all stakeholders. And when I say all stakeholders, I mean the disabled people, I mean the aged people, I mean not just the parents who are leasing the apartment, but also the people who are going to be living there for 10 years. Because for example, right now, if they're launching some projects of Naya Pakistan or other, there is going to be a market for it in 30 years. And when we plan such big projects, we don't waste resources on short-term research. So these adolescents, if they have a negative perception of apartments today, they might not have a positive perception of their living condition tomorrow, and that will definitely affect their satisfaction with their living condition. Then again, it is important to understand that there are hardly any policies that are related to inclusive policies, because most of the times any government come, they announce a housing project and then they move on, and hardly any stakeholder participation is conducted. So countries like Australia and UK, they have started including adolescents in their urban planning by doing mapping, social mapping, and by including them in different activities of how they view their housing condition and how they navigate the streets, for example. But again, most of the emphasis is on outdoor spaces when it comes to the adolescents. And we need to turn inwards and we need to design the inside of the house, because children spend as much time inside the house as they spend outside. So it is very important to understand that apart from race, apart from gender, apart from sect, there is an age dimension to marginality. And you cannot ignore the fact that when it comes to the topic of privacy, privacy is something that is a bit of a luxury. So you have more space, you have more privacy. And we saw this in the COVID-19 situation. Those who had more privacy, those who had more space, they had more chances of survival, for example. So it's a luxury. It is already stratified in its distribution according to economic class. We do not want to stratify it more in terms of age. So if we are going to distribute it only to a certain age group, then we might have to face the consequences. And that's why I think it's very important to understand the age dimension of marginality. Thank you so much.
That was an amazing presentation, Tanya. God bless. And it was something that I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, that we need to, the discussants usually mention this when they're discussing the definition and the expansion of marginalization, how it shouldn't be just restricted to specific groups, population groups, but rather cultural groups and age and the life course, because we're all going to face marginalization at one point or the other. So I'm very happy that you shared this with us. Are there any questions online from some of the students who are with us? Yeah. Bring your mic close and speak as loudly as possible, please.
Okay. So my question stems from an experience. This past year, I've been working with the Digital Rights Foundation as a research assistant, and we conducted a few studies about COVID and privacy. And when I was interviewing people during that time, I interviewed people from FC and people from Hope Tower. And that is a collective living space where I see similarities with what you were talking about. And a lot of things came up about surveillance, right? So camera surveillance in apartment buildings and how that reduces privacy as well. And we were investigating privacy as a human right. So when you were looking into like apartments and privacy there with adolescents, was there anything that you may have discovered or explored with surveillance and cameras and security and whatnot, because that has been on the rise recently?
So whenever we talk about privacy, as you've mentioned, Digital Rights Foundation, we mostly focus on the data privacy nowadays, because we are looking at online things. what's most interesting was I was talking informally to a parent, and they mentioned that it's very easy for me to look over my children. For example, if I'm standing in the kitchen, the house is very small, and I can look at what they're doing in their bedrooms. I'm not leaving the apartment until my children are adult. And that statement was pretty shocking for me, that the parents are choosing to live in apartments because they can stand on the balconies and they can look at what their children are doing. So not obviously children face that surveillance issues, but parents are intentionally having that in their mind. And it's really interesting, because I hope that in the future I'll be able to do this research, how parents choose the mechanism of vertical living to maintain their surveillance on their children.
I think that's really interesting. I think there's also the aspect of it's not just the parents then, right? Because let's say it's the building manager who has the access to these cameras. And I think one of the things lots of people here at FC talked about was, where is that going? Where is this footage going? Who is overseeing this footage? It's a girls' hostel, right? So that was a big concern. So I thought maybe that was something also that could be
Yes,
useful.
I would like to add that for example, you're mentioning corridors. So majority of the apartment buildings, because in residential buildings, there's hardly any surveillance of that sort in corridors. But yes, there are concerns of parents, for example, of managers, what goes on in the corridors at nights, and we have to keep the corridors lighted, and there has to be proper check and balance, so nobody goes onto the roofs and stuff. So yes, this is obviously a concern at this point, and this will just increase to the problem if you're not understanding the problem from the adolescent's point of view. Thank you.
So I have a question. Thank you for a very, very interesting presentation. So my question is, did you see any gender differences in how privacy was described and prioritized among your respondents?
So yes, the first thing was that even if there was any space available, for example, I'm talking about a shared bedroom. So if the parents had any space available, the male sibling was usually preferred to have their own room. So let them have a separate room, and the females can have it later. Even as I'm talking about the use of, for example, bathroom,
Hello.
the girls, they shared that when our brothers are at home, we cannot use the bathroom for more than 5 minutes or 7 minutes, but they can stay in there forever. And majority of the boys, if they have any issues, they move out of the house. They can simply leave at even 12 at the night, and they don't have that kind of problem. But girls facing that issue cannot even leave the environment due to constraints of time and other security issues. So the problem for them is much worse.
Hello.
In terms of gender, for girls, the issue is bigger. And I think that's an overall obviously understanding in our society, but from the point of view of urban planning, this needs to be catered, that for example, you have to protect the security in the societies where there was secure walls. The girls also felt safe going out at night, for example, to talk to a friend. They don't want people to overhear them. But whenever there was no such mechanism, so they felt restrained. What they did was that they put on their headphones and they tried to move from that place, so closing your eyes, just shutting everyone out. So they had their own mechanisms of coping with this was also interesting.
So
Can you hear me?
I've been doing, I've been doing
Hello.
research on yes. Do we have
I'm
a
sorry.
participant? Yeah. Go ahead and ask your question. What's your name?
Please, first, Athar Azim.
Oh, gee, sir, please. पूछिए आप
Sir,
question.
मुझे आप मौका ही नहीं दे रहे आप.
Sorry,
It's,
sir.
it's a wonderful presentation, and first of all, first time I know that this is the area of, this area is also a marginalized population. Just I want to know that Tanyat, the privacy is the problem for them. Is it the issue for them? The people living in that vertical apartments and very poor class people, do you think that it is the problem for them?
Thank you so much for your question, sir. Yes, intentionally, actually, when I planned my research, I had this idea that these children might not even have any conception or notion of privacy, because they're so used to living in this kind of setup. So they might even not know what privacy actually is for them and how important it can be for them. And that is one of the reasons I searched for the different meanings they attach to it. But I was pretty surprised myself that it is an issue. They recognize it as a problem, and if given a chance, they would do things to manage it. So yes, in a collectivist society, and especially in that kind of setup, in a middle income housing place, so that is a problem. And I was also surprised to find out that our young children, because we see in the West, young children have a very proper, well established notion of their privacy, but our young children also have a very fixed notion of their privacy, and they understand the different ideas of individual privacy and how it can lead to the social performance of individuals. So yes, it was very interesting for me to find out that our children are also very well aware of the functions and the need of privacy.
One more question I want to ask, if you don't mind. That the thing is this: there's such problems and such localities have many multiple deviance and criminal activities over there. Would you like to share us what type of the deviance is there?
So the sample that I've selected is mostly from residential apartment buildings. These were sort of relatively a little planned in terms of they had apartment blocks, and then they had a boundary, and then they had a gate of the entrance. So these were relatively planned as compared to, commercial apartment buildings and people living on the tops and shops on the ground floor. This was not the kind of setup that I interviewed the children from. So in that area, there were less chances of crime and deviance. But yes, I've also searched literature on, especially in the US, many projects have been demolished just because growing deviance and crime prevailed. But these were because these were relatively planned. That's why they had a proper guard at the gate, and they had proper entrances to every block of apartment. So I did not face this issue in the apartment buildings that I researched on.
Okay, thank you.
Kenya, would you like to comment or share if you have any information about the laws related to high-rise buildings and overcrowding in urban Pakistan? Because, just a little bit of background, I was trying to research housing in Pakistan, and obviously there's no data. There's no sex disaggregated data for housing. There's an estimate that there's a 10 million housing shortage, but with the 220 plus population, we know it's much more than that. And we know that the people that are in informal settlements and in high-rise building, their quality of housing is not great. They're suffering from housing instability. So any comments or any information that you found or gathered, or any recommendations for law, for the legal system in terms of housing construction and how it could be changed for the better?
So I might not be an expert on the topic, but what I know that in a residential, for example, area, if you're building, having a building for more than 3 apartments, 3 stories and higher, that is not allowed. So when the majority of the apartments in Lahore that I have visited are hardly 5 stories maximum. So they have not gone. You cannot really call it high rise. So in the Western literature, we call it low rise, because high rise for them is 16 stories or 20 stories, and we cannot have that kind of infrastructure. But again, there is a shortage of the implementation of the laws, because nobody really even cares about the 5-story law and that. So I'm not an expert on this, but yes, there are problems with this as well. And another issue is that we cannot have that kind of infrastructure of a 16-story or a 20-story building, because majority of the apartment buildings that I visited did not even have an elevator. And if they had an elevator, they did not have enough electricity to keep it running all the time. So these are some of the issues that have restricted apartment growth in itself. Without any law, it has restricted the growth in itself. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you so much. Is our next presenter online? That would be Tabitha Victor and Alia Talib. Could you put your mics on and say hello so we know you're with us?
Yes, we are with you.
And then I'll introduce you.
Sure, please.
Yes,
It's
is it
Tabitha.
Tabitha? You'll be presenting on behalf of Alia and yourself?
Yes. Could you
Great.
please
So I'll just introduce the presenters. So Tabitha Victor and Alia Talib are lecturers in the Political Science Department of Carnegie College, Women University. They're going to be presenting a detailed literature review that they've been working on for the past few years. And the focus years for that literature review is from 2016 to 2021. The work is on religious minorities exclusion in the educational system, and they'll be concentrating also on the curriculum and how the single national curriculum is targeted for the entire population, excluding consideration of religious minorities. Thank you, Tabitha. Also, you will be sharing. We've given you the rights, and you have 10 minutes, please.
give us just a second? I'm going to share the slides. Can you see the slides?
We can't see them yet.
The final.
Should we share them for you and you can
Yes.
say next?
Yes,
Right,
sure.
we'll share them for you. Tabitha, can you see the presentation slides?
Yes, I can see. Thank
Yeah,
you so
if you
much.
just tell us next, we'll change them for you.
Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. And our topic is the thematic review of literature, focusing on educational exclusion of religious minority in Pakistan. And the presenter are Ms. Tabitha Victor and Ms. Alia Talib. So our study is based upon the analysis, and we have taken the literature, which is from the time period of 2016 to 2021. We have also included 2 or 3 articles in the recent that time period as well. Next slide, please. Uh, the background about this research is that Pakistan has been predominantly Muslim population, and the minorities right from the beginning still face some fundamental human rights violation as well. Our founding father, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, although has said on many occasions that minorities will be protected and given full religious freedom, but still there are some issues as well. Next slide. So the main concern about this research is that to highlighting the importance of education, that education is a basic human right of every individual, regardless of any kind of discrimination. And if in Pakistan, the marginalized communities are excluded from education, so it will be a very threat for the development of the country. And even it will lead toward the inequality at social and even at the different levels as well. Next slide. If we see the background in the history of Pakistan, the most important time period is of General Ziaul Haq time period, in which he introduced the national education policy in 1970s, and that national education policy was also flawed in concern with the representation of the minorities in the curriculum as well. And it was later on being continued. Then some changes were being highlighted in General Pervez Musharraf time period, And he also introduced some reform in 2005 and 16. But still, those reforms were not focusing on the inclusion of the religious minority. And even in the current time period, the national curriculum, the single national curriculum, has also lacked in the inclusive approach and even for the highlighting the contribution of the minorities in the educational field. Next slide. The main objective of our study is to see the educational exclusion and the right of citizenship, special focus toward the religious minorities, and to evaluate the potential changes to educational policy that might promote an inclusive mindset in our society and even at the national level. Next slide. Our research methodology is based upon the thematic review, and the two major themes that we have identified is the educational exclusion and the right of citizenship. And then we have also identified the time period starting from 2016 to 2021, the literature which is focused especially on the exclusion of the religious minorities in Pakistan, and all the literature which we have studied, they are of published. Next slide. So the two major themes, the educational exclusion and the citizenship, are being considered, and the data is analyzed toward the thematic analysis. Next slide. So this is the just a brief view of all the literature we have included. In the first, there is the description about the author, their title, and the year of the publication, and then the main finding. So that we have seen that with referring to the first literature, it is seen that the curriculum has inflicted a routine kind of violence on the minorities, and it creates an environment where there is anti-minority discrimination, and the prejudice attitudes is being produced by the literature which are being taught, especially in our public school. And then the curriculum is also used as a catalyst for the violence as well. Then in the next literature, that it is seen that religious minorities faced a different kind of discriminatory attitudes because some of the writings which is being mentioned in the national curriculum is not supporting them, and it's being segregating them and dividing them. Next slide, please. Okay, then in the other literature, we have also seen that there is the attitudes toward the religious minorities are not so much supportive, and then they are not being encouraged to be a part of the curriculum in an education system, and they face problems even by the teacher, the school environment, and the most of the reason why this kind of attitude, prejudice kind of attitude is promoted is through the curriculum. This curriculum plus the state policies and even the school environment is not supportive toward them. My next literature, which is on the topic of exclusion of the religious minorities from the national curriculum, it says that minority students has not given a choice to study the other alternative subjects which is related to their religion, or they are being imposed to study the one Islamic studies, and they were not being encouraged and plus supported by the teacher as well. So this is breeding a feeling of alienation, and the present curriculum is a source of segregating the society as well. Next slide, please. Okay, then in the different literature, it is being identified that the caste stigma is also there for the minorities as well, and there are different literature who's promoting the hate crimes and targeted terrorism over there, and also building a narrative of us and them as well, like it's othering the religious minorities and considering them as an outsiders as well. Then there is the literature which is focusing on the issues and the state of the religious minorities in Pakistan. It's also highlighted that one of the biggest challenge is their discrimination at an educational level, and it is also promoting the social exclusion as well. Plus, most of the literature is promoting a violence, and then it further leads toward the attack on the religious places of the religious minorities in Pakistan. Next slide. Then, in the conceptualization of the religious belonging of the Christian youth in the higher education, it is seen that minority students experience stereotyped behavior, and when the fellow students know about their identity, they try to avoid them and hesitate them, and they don't want to involve them into the activities as well. So that the major region which is considered to be the problematic thing is the curriculum, which contains such kind of discriminatory writings and thinking about the religious minorities as well. In the next literature, which is highlighting the experiences of minorities group, in their experiences, it is noticed that they face discriminatory attitudes by the teachers and the classmates, and there is a non-inclusive curriculum at various stage of the education system in Pakistan. So they develop some resistance tactics which are being practiced by the minority students. And what are the resistance tactics? Like, they remain quiet, they don't participate in the activities because they don't want confident enough, and they are shy, and they try to avoid some healthy activities as well. So in that way, it is seen that the curriculum need to be changed, and it need to be more inclusive. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And then there are literature which is focusing on the hatred and intolerance which is being promoted toward curriculum in Pakistan. And it is building a narrative that they are inferior and enemies of the Muslim community as well. Then next literature is focusing on a multi-religious curriculum, that it's the need of the society in Pakistan, in which every religion should be highlighted, and they should be highlighted in a very respectful manner. So there should be educational inclusiveness of the religious minorities. Then in the last there are some factors as well which is contributing toward the exclusion. It's like they are stigmatized, neglected, and even ignored, and there's feeling of alienation and distancing themselves from the educational opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, in our findings, we have identified some themes as well. In analysis of all the literature, it shows that there is some routine form of violence which is promoted through the education environment, and plus the teachers as well, and even the fellow students as well. Plus, single religious identity is being taught, or their other religions are not being discussed, encouraged, and no debate is conducted on them. Then prejudice attitudes are being highlighted through our curriculum, which is further leading toward the social divide, and the feeling of alienation is present in the religious minorities as well. Then next, it's also saying that there is a caste stigma, like these are the lower caste and we are the upper class, which is being highlighted through our educational system, and the stereotyping of the religious minority, that they have such kind of thinking and practices and all this. It's also promoting the hatred and terrorism, making them the inferior and the enemies of the majority community as well. And later it is also seen that that narrative of us and them and dividing them, and promoting not only educational exclusion but also socially divide and socially exclusion as well. Then the major theme.
Dear Rita, sorry to cut you off. You have 5 more minutes to wind up your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, And then it's also seen that okay, there is a resistance tactic in a response from the minority students. They are becoming quiet and they are sitting at the back and not participating because of this kind of environment. So there is need to have a multi-religious curriculum and educational activity. Next slide, please. In concluding my thoughts, it is concluded that the educational system in Pakistan need to be redesigned to adapt an inclusive approach, as Pakistan education system is not conducive enough to encourage the religious harmony and diversity. Even the single national curriculum does not encourage an inclusive approach either, as religious minorities are largely left out of the curriculum and textbook in the public school as well. The society become more polarized as a result of this form of exclusion. Next slide. So it is recommended that the inclusion of the minority group in the country is very important, and it is critically necessity to include a religious minority in the field of the development, because minorities who are the educated are the valuable asset for the nation, and it is advised that education should foster harmony, progress, tolerance, and respect for diversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Are there any questions from the online participants or faculty? So I had a question. I was wondering if Tabitha, you had done any, you had any findings related to the single national curriculum and how they, in the committee that designed it, insists that there is religious inclusion. For example, they teach ethics. For example, they've changed numerous textbooks related to social studies. They've introduced new case studies in the English and the Urdu textbooks. So if you have any information related to the limitations or anything that you found related to that in the literature, if you could share with us, please.
I don't have that much information about it, but a little concern. It is being highlighted that this single national curriculum is just being implemented without considering or without any workshop trainings. And even the teachers, they are reluctant to taught this kind of system because they are not being trained and educated. So that the major hurdle which I have found out that attitude of the teacher. They're not being supportive toward the single national curriculum. And so far, I didn't find anything that is being inclusive in the in aspect of the religious minority contributions.
Thank you, Tanyat. Okay, I'll thank all the participants, and I'll just close our conference for today with a small note that Sharmeen, the conference secretary, and I have written together. I'd first like to thank everyone. That's the organizers, my conference committee, my students, the Forman Sociological Society, the IT support system, the dean who's been guiding us right from day one. And unfortunately, a lot of us are not well, and he's not well, so he wasn't able to join us today. All the speakers, we had a varied group of expert speakers from the social sciences. We can't say that they were just from sociology. We had clinical psychologists, urban sociologists, gender specialists. And I think this is a multidisciplinary area. Though we love to proudly own it, that sociologists mostly work on marginalization and research related to minority populations, but really it's only when the social scientists come together that we can get anywhere. We know that Pakistan faces multiple challenges. There's not just issues related to social transformation, political turmoil, and economic crisis now most recently. There's also the recent climate change-led disasters and the floods. But the paramount concern is that, you know, whenever we face challenges and problems, the focus becomes on the majority, on Punjab, on the Muslims. And I'm sorry to take the names of groups over here, but we forget the marginalized populations, and it's their voices that we need to hear the most, especially during times of change and numerous challenges that we're facing. We've highlighted a lot of issues and concerns that we've been able to collect from this conference today. But one of the highlights that I'd like to conclude with was the dearth of confirmed statistics in Pakistan, whether it was special needs children, whether it was informal sector workers, whether it was the Sufi, saint followers and those who are living in shrine communities, and the list is endless. Very recently, we are using a statistic that there are 8 million flood affected victims, but we know that this statistic is much higher. So I think if we had to conclude with one or two things, and we'll summarize all of this in the conference book of abstracts, which we'll publish soon online and share with everybody, but that we need more data, we need more research, and we need more data in Pakistan related to all the marginalized communities and the marginalized issues. This year's conference has also been unique and valuable for all of us together because it's brought to light issues of structural violence, discrimination, and risks for Pakistan. And unless we design better protective policy for all our groups, we won't be able to make Pakistan a more progressive society or an equitable nation. I thank you again on behalf of the department and FSS, and we'll be sharing the proceedings online, so all is not lost for those who weren't with us. Thank you so much.